Hello, everybody. My name is Ratnos, and today we have some pretty big news, which is the patch 9.0.5 update to the game is now on the PTR, and it's actually got some pretty big changes coming in that are going to affect the game somewhat dramatically. So, starting right off the bat, this update will be a bit different from our usual patches. It's focused almost entirely on systems, which I think is a really cool thing to be doing here. Responding to community feedback about rewards, and doing tuning that requires the sort of notice and iteration that a PTR allows, and fixing a range of bugs. Okay, yeah, bugs. Obviously, fix when possible, make a bunch of new ones along the way. That's how it goes. So, here are two of the larger changes you'll see in patch 9.0.5, with further iteration to follow over the next few weeks. Upgradable Mythic Keystone Gear, the return of Valor points. We've seen a lot of feedback about the pros and cons of the various sources of gear in the Shadowlands. After a rewarding first few weeks, we know that many dungeon-focused players reached a point where the only relevant rewards from the system come from the Great Vault. And that's actually, there are a lot of people who don't even do dungeons anymore in the current state of the game, even if they sort of like them, because there's actually no rewards, assuming that you, like if you just raid, you've got your 3 raid Great Vault slots, and particularly if you're Mythic clearing, those can be 233 items and the M plus slots can't. So very much a true thing that the rewards, after a rewarding first few weeks, ended up kind of, Mythic Dungeon gear hits a ceiling really early in the patch with the system. That's kind of been true always, but with the fact that the Great Vault now applies to PvP and raid as well, that kind of one thing that made everybody do their weekly key even is going away, or has gone away for a lot of players. While the Vault should represent a major goal and the source of the best rewards the endgame has to offer, want to find a way for the loot from the chest at the end of a challenging Mythic Keystone run to feel relevant without bringing back random upgrade systems. So again, that's, I think, a good way to do this, because there have been a lot of problems with... a lot of people are pretty fatigued with the random upgrade idea, so I don't think it would have been popular if they'd announced, we fixed this by bringing back Titan Foraging. But it did indeed partially solve that problem in the past. So here's the way that they are going to do that. The framework for a system is in this first PTR update, subject to ongoing tuning refinements. This is the second time they've basically said this isn't final. Gear from Mythic Dungeons is now upgradable, initially with a cap of item level 200, which players can raise to 207 by completing all 8 Shadowlands Keystone or Shadowlands dungeons at 5 or higher. That gets you Keystone Explorer. Existing Keystone Conqueror achievement for all 10s lets you then go up to 213, and then 220 for all 15s in time. The currency used to upgrade Mythic Keystone gear is Valor, which is earned from dungeons or by doing callings with a weekly cap. So very similar to Conquest, except instead of being from mostly from rated PvP with a couple of, time-gated, limited sources of getting it from, random, your first win of the day and a daily epic battleground being a really good source of Conquest, for instance, and a regular random battleground. Similarly, there's going to be if you want to get a lot of Valor, if you want to cap on Tuesday, you're going to do dungeons. But if you don't mind capping more slowly throughout the week, you can just do your callings and upgrade your M plus gear that way. Upgrade costs will vary by item slot and will be consistent across all item levels. So it's not going to be like PvP gearing where that 220 to 226 upgrade or 226 to 233 upgrade is extremely expensive. So I think this is a really, really good system design here. There are, of course, a couple of nitpicks that I think I am not alone in having identified. I'm sure that several people have already stopped the video and have written their angry comments bringing up these nitpicks, and thumbs down the video for me being a Blizzard shill or whatever. But I think that the thing that we should be looking at is still that comparison with the PvP gear does seem a little bit off. When you put these two systems next to each other, the way they talk about it, right? The Vault should represent a major goal and the source of the best rewards the endgame has to offer. That's not actually true for PvP, right? For PvP, you might get a good item from your Great Vault. It is the only way to get a tertiary if you care about that in your item. But if you want to get a specific item, you can get it from just the vendor, and you can upgrade it as high as the Great Vault can get you to, right? You can get all your 233 weapons, upgrading them that way, or you can get your 226s and other slots from upgrading them through PvP. So I think that M+, I think that it would be good to have that available for M+ as well. The exact achievement threshold I think is an interesting question. I don't have too strong of an opinion about it. I don't have too strong of an opinion about, for instance, whether 226 should be the 15s and 233, and like maybe they let you do like 233 in some off slot that neither raid nor, or maybe just 233 weapons like raid and M plus both get, or sorry, like raid and PvP both get, could come from doing all the 20s in time. That is kind of a similar extra big bit of difficulty like going from 2100 to 2400 is in PvP, and that's what gets you access to the 233s in PvP. So I think something like that should be considered for M+. I do think, though, that 226s should be somewhere accessible, maybe not at 15s, maybe 16s, 17s, 18s as well. I think that would be a really good direction to bring it also. I like this change a lot, though. I do think also, so I think that this is a really good change to Mythic Keystone gear. I still think that Raid could also, Raid and PvP both have some minor pain points with gear as well, but I think M plus gear was the biggest pain point, where reward-focused players, even if dungeons were their most favorite content, were doing dungeons less than any other form of activity. I kind of fell into this this category as well, where like raids and even PvP, which I enjoy. I enjoy raids a lot more than dungeons when I'm on progression. Then once I'm on farm, I enjoy dungeons more usually. And PvP, which I generally avoid except for when there is rewards. I ended up doing a lot more of those this season so far than dungeons. So I think this is a really good way to attack that. I think this is going to be a really good way for alts to gear. I think this is going to be a really good way for players who, are getting better over the course of a couple months to improve their gear. And there are several pretty good trinkets from M+, that'll be nice to be able to get them reliably up to 220. I'm still holding out hope that there will be some way to get them to 226. I think that would be a good way to do this. Or if they really decide that this, that they really want the Great Vault to be especially good, maybe they should consider applying that to PvP as well. Because it does seem a little bit out of whack that the Vault is superior than what you can get in dungeons, but worse or the same as what you can get from PvP. So maybe they could do something like, if they want to keep this structure, they could add a 226 weapon tier for M+, for like, I don't know, the 17s, the 18s, the 20s, something like that, and then shave down PvP by one row, right, and make it so PvP, except for from the Great Vault, you can only get up to 220 in most slots and 226 in the weapon slots. I don't know. I think that those are some things they maybe should consider here, but in the scheme of things, there's going to be a lot of discussion, particularly if you're tuned in on Twitter, complaining about those sorts of things. And I think that really this is like 98% of the system that pretty much everybody was hoping for, everybody that I agree with, at least. So I guess this is 98% of the system I was hoping for. And so I wouldn't want to focus too much on those negatives or those nitpicks. And also, I think, again, there's a lot of emphasis here that ongoing tuning and refinement, further iteration to follow over the next few weeks. I'm pretty optimistic, given how so far in this expansion, there has been that pretty big history of, an actual change in process where there have been frequent changes. We've seen impactful hotfixes most weeks for the past couple months even. There's been impactful hotfixes. And so that brings us to the next point here, which is Covenant and Legendary tuning. We deliberately used a very light touch with any hotfixes that might affect a Covenant or Legendary balance. This is something that I identified as being their strategy when I saw the first couple weeks worth of changes to these things, as we're keenly aware of the resources players have invested in those systems. Obviously, this can't last forever, though, right? Eventually, you're going to need to, new stuff is going to come out, right? Even if they delayed doing this in 9.05, by the time 9.1 comes around, there's just going to be Legendaries and Covenants that need to change. And so a patch allows for ample notice for the community and a testing and feedback loop that should help ensure we don't unintentionally undermine your investment in your Covenant or Legendary items. In many cases, the changes coming in 9.05 are improvements to Legendary items and Covenant class abilities that have seen comparatively less use by players. Our goal with these changes is to provide more gameplay options for crafting and utilizing Legendary items in specific situations, and to make sure that more players feel that the Covenant that suits their aesthetic, narrative, or other preferences for their character also feels more viable for their preferred playstyle. So my read of this is, if they land this right, it's not going to change the BIS Covenant for you, right? If you're a warrior, a DPS warrior in Raid, you're still gonna, if they accomplish this, Venthyr is still going to be your best choice. You're not going to need to change covenants. But instead of being like 10 or 15% behind for having vibed with the Necrolord aesthetic and gone with that for your character, they're hopefully bringing that up to the 5 or 2% behind. This is a really tight line to walk, and I think that one way they've avoided overshooting that and changing what a BIS Covenant or BIS Legendary has been with this extremely light touch and with only targeting a few things. And I think that if they do actually seek out, if you go and look at all of the underperforming Covenants and you buff all of them, I do think there's a really good chance that, at least in some situations, and likely more, we are going to see the first time in the expansion where people's Covenants are going to be retroactively wrong. So in that example, right, like, it's possible that they bring Necrolord DPS Warrior right up to where Venthyr is, but maybe it'll overtake, right? And if it overtakes even by 2 or 3%, even if Venthyr Warrior is untouched, my suspicion is that those 80% of DPS Warriors that chose Venthyr, a solid amount of them will then feel pretty bad and go and make the swap to Necrolord. And my suspicion is that if that happens on any kind of broad scale, we'll start to see a push for more accessibility with Covenant swaps. It's kind of a win-win here because either that happens, right? Either it's a problem and that push happens, and then hopefully if they're staying responsive, they do come up with some way to make that not feel as bad as I believe it would. Or they manage to land the balancing here again, which so far this expansion, they've done a very good job with the Covenant balancing, I would say, to prevent those sorts of feel bad. So if they can just keep doing that balancing act the whole expansion, that's also fine by me. I mean, I do think that it's a little bit of a shame. I remember, one of my favorite things about MDI, for instance, is when you watch the MDI, like the Disc Priest, every single Covenant sees play. They swap between the Covenants and use different ones for different dungeons, and the abilities are really cool and powerful. They're not actually that powerful. A lot of how they're balanced is by being all pretty tuned down compared to the versions we first saw in the first alpha. But that swapping around and using the different situational Covenants in different situations looked really cool. So I'm somewhat hopeful that this goes wrong and that leads them to making Covenants swappable, because I would love to choose what Covenant I wanted to be for each situation and get access to all the different options that they provide and all the different cool abilities, rather than not having that choice at all and kind of feeling like, especially, it depends on what spec you're playing, but like that Venthyr DPS Warrior I was just talking about, that player wants to go tank a key and they are going to very much feel that they aren't a Kyrian, right? And that they don't have particularly on Necrotic Week, they don't have the File of Serenity, but always, Spear Bastion is such a great option and so much good defense from the Kyrian Covenant for that spec, right? So I think that there's there's a lot of Shadowland systems that do already provide a little bit of friction for multi-classers, for people that want to be PvPers and M+ers and Raiders, or any two of those three. But they've done a really good job so far of preventing that friction from hitting players that just play one form of content seriously as one spec. And I think that they've done a pretty good job of preventing those players from having any angst about their Covenant or their legendary options. And I guess for me, it's fine either way. Either they continue that and then we're cool, or they break that and then people will get mad and hopefully they'd fix it. And that would actually fix the angst that those players who do like swapping around between Fire and Frost, between Raid and M+, those players would benefit from that. So I'm happy to see this direction, and I'm hoping they mess up. Hoping they mess up in this area. Provided that they would eventually change the system based on outcry. If that wouldn't happen, then of course I hope that they just get this thing right. Can't lose though. Win-win either way. Whatever happens with this, I'm pretty likely to end up happy about it. So that's it. That's what's happening in 9.0.5. I'm sure that I will talk more about the specific changes that are in this area, but I just wanted to get this video out really quick to try and farm some clicks. So that's what's going to happen. The video is done now. Check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Ratnos. Hit like and subscribe and stuff. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next one.